My biscuits always came out really hard and terrible, but I finally found a way to do it, and they are consistently coming out pretty much delicious. Stick around, I'll show you how I do it. I needed some non-copyrighted music, but I couldn't find any, so I had to make my own, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I'm not even kidding, guys. Seriously, for years, my biscuits were terrible. Everybody loved the gravy, but the biscuits were like hard as a rock. So anyways, I did some research and I finally came across a technique where this lady showed a way that has worked for me, and I want to share it with you guys. I'm going to measure out 4. The first ingredient that I'm starting with is butter, and I am using a stick and a half, which is a cup and a half of butter. And I don't necessarily use frozen butter, which a lot of recipes and stuff shows that you have to use frozen butter, but I found that a little bit pretty hard to work with. So I'm just using regular temperature butter. I think one of these is from the fridge and one of them is from the counter. So what I do instead is after I'm done cutting the biscuits out, then I'll put them in the freezer for a little bit so that they can be nice and cold. The next ingredient for our biscuits is 3 cups of flour. I am using all-purpose flour, and if you're using self-rising flour, then that's basically all the ingredients that you need. But because I'm using all-purpose flour, I will also be adding 1.5 tablespoons of baking powder. Baking powder. The next ingredient that I'm going to be adding is salt, because I put salt in everything. I even put salt in my lemonade and desserts. So if you like salt as much as I do, add a little bit. If you don't, just keep it out. And once you have all of that mixed in, then you're going to go ahead and put your butter in and get that all really crumbly. And so my biscuits never came out good. They always came out hard. And it's funny because my tortillas always come out soft. Well, I was watching this one lady that ended up using the same technique that I use in my tortillas to know at what point you're gonna have a good dough and when you can proceed to the next step. And so if you can see right here, I'm squeezing the dough and it's forming a clump. And then if you press on it, then it crumbles apart. And I do that same thing with my tortillas. That's how you know that you have enough fat in there and that you're gonna have a good soft tortilla. And apparently I've been using that same trick with my biscuits, and this is the only time in my life that they have come out to the point that they are edible. So I am thrilled to have discovered this technique, and I hope that this really works for you. I don't always measure my tortillas. I measure out my flour according to how much I think we're going to be eating that day and if we want leftovers or not. And as long as I reach this consistency before I start adding in the water, they always come out perfect. So I'm thinking this could be used as well with biscuits, and it has for me so far. And now that we have determined that we are ready to move on to the next step with our biscuits, the only last ingredient that we need to add is milk. And again, I'm not a direction recipe follower, so I just put in enough for it to clump up into a ball of dough. And the other trick thing that you're not supposed to do is you don't want to overwork your dough. So I'm really just letting all of the flour get wet, and I do let it get a little bit pretty sticky, and I will show you what I do once it reaches to that point. For now, what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that there's no patches of dry flour anywhere. So I'm being sure to scrape the bottom and the sides and just inspecting it for any powdery spots. And I think that might be enough. So you can see that it's like really sticking to my fingers and it's not coming off. So we're ready to put this onto the counter, so that way we can start shaping out and cutting out the biscuits. Be sure to flour the counter. So once it's on the counter and you try to get most of it off your fingers, you just want to start pressing it out and folding it over on itself a couple of times, and that's what's gonna give the biscuits their layer. And I do have a dough scraper, and so that helps to kind of get it off the counter, but I don't know what happened to it, so I'm just working with it with my hands, and I'm just folding it over all the way over, and then I'm pressing it down, and I'm bringing the other side and pulling that over and pressing it down again. And I'm going to continue doing that, and that will give the biscuits their layers when you pull them apart. That's how you get it. So again, I'm just folding this over, and if you need to, you can add more flour and just keep on doing that.
Mommy,
Yo.
look, I only beat it with the soup sauce, and that's it.
How did you do that?
I don't know.
So once you have it flattened down to a square shape, and it's about, I'd say about a ½ inch in thickness, then I just take my cup. I don't have a cookie cutter thingy, but I just flour a plate and I put the biscuits onto there, and I just keep repeating the process, trying to get as many biscuits out of this piece of dough that I can. And this amount of flour, the 3 cups of flour and the 1.5 cups of butter, gives us about 12 biscuits, depending on how thick I roll them, depending on how thick I spread it out of. It's about 12 biscuits. And at the end, I just make a biscuit with my hands. I just form it to the same shape, just about as the biscuits. And my daughter made a gingerbread one, and she decided to give that last piece of dough a royal beat down for whatever reason. And once the biscuits are all cut, then I've got to shove them into the freezer for about 10 minutes.
Thank you for watching.
And while the biscuits are chilling out in the freezer, I went ahead and made a gravy to go with them. And when the gravy is just about done, I preheat the oven to 350, and I put the frozen biscuits in for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. I started out with 10 minutes because that's what the instructions recipe lady said. But for me, I found that I have to start the timer again, and they're still usually not done. So for me, they are cooking at around 25 minutes. And let me just show you how soft and fluffy these biscuits are. They're really, really good. I'm actually shocked that I finally was able to pull this off over and over again. We've been having them for breakfast and dinner, and with jelly and butter. They just taste really, really good. So I am excited to show you guys this video. I would be also putting up a video for the gravy soon, so don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching. I needed some non-copyrighted music, but I couldn't find any, so I had to make my own, and I have no idea what I'm doing.